Global Conservation Corps presents the Rhino Man podcast. I'm John Jerko, your host, and one of the directors of Rhino Man the movie. This podcast series is a way for me to interview top conservationists on the topics of rhinos, the poaching crisis, the importance of rangers, and community engagement, all as a way to create awareness around these issues and to promote the coming release of our documentary film. In this episode, I'm talking with my friend Sean Willmore. Sean was an Australian park ranger for 11 years before selling his car, remortgaging his home, and heading off on a 14-month trip around the world to make a film about rangers. His efforts to bring attention to the dangerous work undertaken by these warriors has won him international acclaim. Using profits from the documentary The Thin Green Line, Sean started the Thin Green Line Foundation, where he currently works as the founder and managing director. He also served for 8 years as the president of the International Rangers Federation. In this conversation, we talk about Sean's early connection to conservation and his work as a ranger in Australia. We dive deep into the decision to risk it all to follow a passion to tell these rangers' stories. We hear about the many challenges that rangers face in diverse settings around the world and what the Thin Green Line Foundation is doing to address them. There's so many amazing stories from Sean's life and from the fellow rangers he's encountered. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. All right, welcome to the show, Sean. It's an honor to have you here.
Good on you, John. Yeah, it's great to be here, and we got the times lined up around the world. So thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the first time I met you was probably briefly at the 2019 Chitwan International Ranger Federation's World Ranger Congress, which seems like ages ago now with all the stuff that's happened in between then and now. But we've had some nice conversations before, and I'd really love to just dig into what you're doing at the Thin Green Line Foundation and kind of how you got into all this, how you got your start, and go from there. But maybe before we even do that, just give us a brief overview of what you're currently doing, what your role is, and what the Thin Green Line Foundation is.
Yeah, well, firstly, it was great to meet you at Chitwan. It does feel like an age ago, and I believe a bunch of rangers came back from that feeling sick with flu-like symptoms, and that was the very start of COVID. So I'm not sure whether rangers were the super spreader around the world. But
it's possible.
But yeah, since then I've been in one of the most locked down cities or places in the world, in Melbourne, and it's even worse because I'm 100 k's out of Melbourne, but we're considered Melbourne. So we weren't even in it, but we were locked down over 250 days, I think it is, or something like that. So to talk about what worldwide conservation and all those adventures that I've had with rangers, it's a pleasure to delve back there, at least in memory, and get out of lockdown.
For sure.
So where are we at the moment? Well, Thin Green Line is going great as an organisation and the impact that we're having. I think a few things stand out for me. And when I started Thin Green Line Foundation, it was very much about supporting the widows and children of rangers killed in the line of duty. Mm. And I'm really pleased to say that with one of our programs, Lead Ranger, which trains rangers to be trainers of other rangers, lives are being saved. So names are not going on to that honour roll that we release each July 31st because of the work of Thin Green Line Foundation and our partner, International Anti-Poaching Foundation and Ranger Campus, who are doing Lead Ranger. I think there was another report of another community member saved by rangers trained through this process. One of the big key elements is Ranger Lifesaver, where they learn critical bleed control techniques, which has been the major cause of ranger death, whether it be trauma by animals or whether it be an incident with poachers, et cetera, et cetera. But those rangers are now applying it to the community. So half the lives we're seeing saved, I think I said 17 it is at the moment that I'm aware of. And that's what we're aware of, just from one program. Half of those are rangers and half are community. So
amazing.
I'm really enthused by that program, and it's about to scale up a bit across Africa, and then hopefully we can start taking to other continents as well. And I think of that, and just to put it in some context for people, in one area we train 4 rangers from one group. In the big life rangers, the Maasai Rangers in near Amboseli, Kilimanjaro, they went and trained 300 other rangers. Those 300 rangers dispersed over over 1 million hectares. Now, the community who live in this community conservation area, 50,000 Maasai now have access to emergency first aid.
That's pretty amazing.
And from that, a bulk of those 17 lives have been saved. That's from 4 rangers being trained. On top of that, we actually helped build a ranger training centre there for Big Life, and now they're using it to train other rangers from the region. And the really great thing about this program is it's not a tick box approach of we train some rangers, see you later, we all feel good. The rangers are left in situ, they're from the community, they're from those rangers, and they're maintaining the training. So it's a legacy project. So even after we've done it, it continues. So that's really keeping me enthusiastic. And we've now got a new program on the other side of the world in the Amazon, working with a very trusted colleague, Marcelo Segalerba. He's working with the indigenous community rangers in the Amazon. And, like he was telling me the stat that I think 40% of the world's forest loss last year was solely in the Amazon. So they're right up against it. So this program is going to be quite extensive, and it's going to be one of our key flagship programs going in the next bit. I'm just really happy that we're branching into that space with the Indigenous Rangers there and Marcelo. But it can be even small things, and these are the things that really, well, I was going to say float my boat. And you understand why it's ironic in a moment, because we bought a boat for some rangers in the Amazon. Now, it was only $4,000 to buy this new boat, but there's no roads in this area. The only way to get around through this jungle is the river. Mm-hmm. And we're on this global call. And this ranger who was presenting on just their work, I said, oh, yeah, but our boat's broken and we don't have access to a boat. And I was waiting for someone else to fall, because there's a few really good people on the meeting in good organisations to say, hey, we'll cover you. But no one did. And I think that's where Thin Green Line really excels, and where I get excited is it's those little things that make a massive difference. And so I just said to them at the end of the call, $4,000, you said? I said, we've got it. And she went, what? And she was almost crying. And then now from that $4,000, they've got this boat and they've got access to patrol, but also it's a lifeline for their families and communities for emergency support if they need to get someone to hospital, because that's the only way out. But so now conservation's happening, community connections happening, healthcare's happening, all for $4,000. And I go, yeah, they're the things I love to do that everyone else might look at and go, well, that's not a big project. I'm not worried about that. So Thin Green Line continues to do that. And I've got a great team. I've got a general manager who's a great mate of mine, an ex-ranger. He's doing a great job running the mechanics of the organisation, I suppose, and bringing his own slant. He's worked a lot with Indigenous communities. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right through our team in admin and project management. It's small. We only got 4 full-timers, and it's going well. And we're getting more out to the field. But we're realistic. What we're doing is the tip of the iceberg. We need to do more and more, and we need to partner and collaborate with as many people as we can to make sure we have even greater impact for rangers, because the need's still there, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so great. And I love hearing, it's always nice when organizations have this bigger level mission that they're going for and bigger projects. But when you recognize something that you can do that's maybe smaller, but you can implement it quickly, it's amazing the impact you're going to have immediately. I mean, during COVID, I saw a lot of that where people were like, this is our main focus, but right now there's this need and we need to take care of it. And people went and did it. So it's great to hear that you guys are doing that.
Well, you mentioned the COVID too, and like sometimes conservation isn't direct conservation. We had one ranger, I won't mention his name for privacy, but he contacted us and said, look, this isn't conservation, but I'm a ranger you've supported. I've gone through the lead ranger program. I'm a really passionate ranger. You know me, but because of COVID, I've lost half my salary. And my son is going through chemotherapy at the moment, and I can't afford the last round of chemotherapy. He was in Africa, and he said, so I don't know where else to turn. I've got nowhere else, and this is my son's life. You know what? So your humility of asking on that situation kind of goes out the window, but he was humbly asking, hey, and it was only a few $1,000. It wasn't much. And whilst some people might argue that supporting that isn't conservation, I would 1,000% disagree and say, well, it totally is conservation, because how's that ranger feel about his job if, because he's solely a ranger and protects animals and wildlife and nature, that he's able to get support to help his son live?
Yeah, exactly.
So we supported that, and he sent us a photo a couple of months later, I think it was, maybe 3 or 4 months later, of a very relieved father with this sigh on his face and a big smiling son who was 12 years old. And he said, this is the photo, we just got the results that he's clear of cancer. Put a price on that.
It's huge.
Can you imagine how much effort that guy's going to put into saving rhinos and elephants now.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to talk more. I mean, really, I want to dive into rangers and why they're important and the support that they deserve and need. And I think that's a great example because I think we sometimes underestimate how much one person can make a difference, and by supporting that person, what that can do and the effects down the line. Like you're just saying, helping this guy. I mean, he's going to be so much more dedicated and feel supported as someone out there. And I think that's something we could talk about too, is just how a lot of these rangers don't have a great support system. But before we get into all that, because that's a big topic, I really would love to jump back to kind of your beginnings and how you got connected to conservation growing up in Australia, how you
Yeah.
became a ranger and what that story is. So I'm not sure where you want to start, but yeah, really curious.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thanks, man. It's a good opportunity to be nostalgic, I suppose, in some ways. I suppose it was just within me. So I was born in a country area, but grew up in the inner city of Melbourne in a housing commission area. My dad was a Vietnam veteran and was probably struggling with his PTSD from the war. So he's in and out of jobs. And so we grew up in this area that was actually inner city Melbourne near a creek, which is an important part of the story. And, I liked adventure. We got some bikes and we were always riding down the creek. Now, the creek there wasn't a lovely, serene nature experience that you might think. It was the 80s, 70s and 80s in Melbourne, and it was a rough area. And so that's where a lot of, the gangs hang out and people are dumping stuff but there's still a lot of nature down there, but it was amongst all of that scenario. So you had to keep your eyes open, especially going to and from the creek and even down the creek. Anyway, but I still loved it. It was just adventure and I was outside and you did see some birds and some animals and, I just loved it. Anyway, I was coming back from cricket training and I was a young kid and I threw a can of soft drink after I finished it in the gutter. And this guy politely stopped on his bike and said, "Hey, mate, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. It goes to the sewer." And he goes, No, that goes to the creek, mate. The drains connect to the creek. And I went, "Oh." So I picked it up and I put it probably in the bin. They didn't have recycling back then, I don't think. And it was the first time I made a connection between my actions and my impact on the environment that I liked and loved. And so it just got my little cogs turning in my head. And then soon after, I was sitting in the local library, which looked at the city, and I couldn't see the city for the smog. And then I was thinking, oh, well, hang on. The adults meant to have all this sorted. Why is there so much smog that we can't see the city? And I remember drawing a machine that actually sucked up the smog and turned it into brick. So I was ahead of my time.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Make that thing happen. You'll be rich.
Yeah. Well, then I realized they're called trees. Yeah. But they do it automatically. Yeah. But there is a machine. Yeah. I like the idea. But anyway, it was turning for me. And so I became an avid conservationist. It was within me. And I had stickers on all the light switches in the house and on the toilet about not flushing too much and not turning off lights, and drove my dad crazy. All these stickers everywhere. Yeah, then wildlife became more prominent for me. And as I went through schooling, I started the environment club at school because I was, and my friends would tease me by just throwing their rubbish on the ground, just going, "Well, Sean will pick it up." So, I started the environment school. I think it's still going, the environment club, I think it's still going at that school. But I wanted to see change. I wanted to do something, and I knew we had to do something. I got to university, and then I had the chance of maybe doing some research honours. But as a field trip to a national park here, a beautiful national park called Wilson's Promontory, which features a lot in my life. And I met a ranger there, and I saw his ability to be outside but still be engaged in conservation and science. I was like, that's for me. I don't want to be in a lab. I want to be out there. Fast forward, I went from university to working at Phillip Island as a parade ranger, looking after penguins, basically, making sure people didn't take flash photos of them at night and hurt their eyes and steal them even. But I ended up working at the prom after that, back where I first got inspired to be a ranger, under this guy, Jim Whelan, who's called Mr. Prom. He's a ranger's ranger. He'd go on patrols on his days off just to see the park, Anyway, he looked after me. I did my fire training. I was involved in rescues. I was involved in all sorts of stuff. It was really dynamic. I loved it. You rocked up to work. You didn't know what was going to happen. And so I got a few different tickets working on him on top of my degree, and my ranger career was away. So I went from Wilson's Prom in Victoria, very high. It's called an icon park because people just love it, and it's the southern tip of mainland Australia, coastal. I went from there to inland Victoria, Murray Sunset National Park, 600,000 hectares, which is big for Victoria, which is a kind of a semi-arid park. And then back down to where I live now, to the Mornington Peninsula. Yeah, and it was actually Wilson's Prom that featured again, where I went to an International Ranger Congress at that prom, and that's where I met rangers from around the world who showed me their machete wounds and bullet holes that started Thin Green Line. So that's a short snap of how I became a ranger and why.
Yeah, what do you feel like after, we're going to dive into it here shortly, after you've kind of been around the world and seen so many different rangers in so many different roles and environments, but what do you feel like is unique about being a ranger in Australia?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I suppose I should qualify that back when I was a ranger in the 90s and 2000s. It's probably different to now from what I hear from my ranger colleagues. But the amazing thing about being a ranger in that period was that you were the jack of all trades, like you got to do everything. So you could be rocking up to work and you're off to a rescue or a fire, or you might be doing some scientific surveys, or you might be doing some education, or you might be catch and release a snake that's got into someone's cabin or tent, or you're on a outstations patrol for 2 weeks where you just with your backpack and going to the cabins and living out. It could be anything.
Yeah.
And I love that aspect of it. That was so diverse. It was really amazing. And I suppose in the Australian context, and that I've had all the international experience, you didn't have the big things to worry about, like, poachers so much. I mean, I did come across them, but it wasn't anywhere near the scale of what we see overseas. And I suppose the largeness of the landscape in some of the places is pretty incredible too. And the ability to be by yourself in nature without anybody else there at times, and you're being paid to work there. Not very well, even in Australia, not very well. I think I found out that I was below the poverty salary wage, and I had a degree working as a ranger for the government, and I was being paid below the poverty line. Wow. So they obviously take advantage of the fact that you're passionate about your work. And in fact, Queensland University did a study that showed that rangers, I think it was Queensland University, that rangers were the most qualified people in the public sector. Usually got degrees or diplomas, but plus your fire tickets, all these different other tickets you have to have.
Certifications.
The lowest paid. So highest trained, lowest paid. Yeah, so it's a passion job. And I suppose with that, it's the people you work with. Like the people you work with are pretty amazing.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of a theme around the world, huh? There's a lot of passion and usually not the amount of pay you would think that you would get for the amount of work and danger that you put yourself into for that role. But what came first? Was it the idea to start the Thin Green Line Foundation, or was it the film, or did they kind of come together? Did you have any background in film? Kind of want to dive into that pretty soon here, but what came first and how did this all come about?
Well, yeah, geez, that's I suppose a bit of serendipity and a bit of listening to your inner voice a bit. So the quick answers were no, I had no experience in film. The film kind of came first after meeting those rangers at that International Ranger Congress. And then the foundation wasn't even a thought. I had no intention of setting up an organization. No, zero. So basically I met those rangers at this conference, and A, they were really inspiring. B, they were really funny. Like, we sat around fires telling stories about being rangers around the world, and there's some hilarious stories, And then I was quite shocked to realize the scale. I knew some stuff happened with rangers overseas for sure, but the scale of it, when I'm sitting around a fire with 6 other rangers having a beer, after all the proceedings of the day, and then 3 of them can pull out wounds inflicted on them by poachers. Like, one showed a machete wound, one showed a bullet hole. There's something else. And then they told stories, and I went, wow. And then through the International Ranger Federation, I started to realize, there's a bunch of rangers that actually have their families destitute afterwards because there's no workers' compensation in many countries for rangers. So the actual line of it all was I actually just wanted to go visit these rangers around the world. I hadn't been overseas either. I went from university into my ranger roles, not straight away, but fairly much into the workforce. And then, so I was 30-something, early 30s. and hadn't been overseas. I thought, well, I'll go visit these ranges. And then I thought, that's a bit of a selfish pursuit just to say g'day. Maybe I could tell the story that I heard around the campfire, both the funny story, the tragic story, but just the human story of who are these people that look after the world. And so, not knowing any better, I decided to pursue that and I'll make a film. Luckily, I got good advice from professional filmmakers that said, do this, get this camera. Some new technology came out where it's a tiny camera that had all the stuff that the big cameras used to have.
Yeah. Was it mini DV you were shooting on at that time? That was like around 2003?
Little tapes.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, it had the first camera of that size. It had a Leica lens and 3-phase color or something, and so you could get really good imagery. I mean, that was outdated 18 months later, of course, but it did the job. Yeah, so I contacted the rangers, and in my little town where I live, there's this one pub, and I bumped into the guy who lived in my town that organised the whole Ranger Congress. Somehow he was contracted to organise that Congress. I said, hey, I've got this idea. I'm going to travel around the world. I'm going to make a film. I need the list of those rangers, the 400 rangers that were at the Congress. And he said, I can't give it to you, privacy and all that stuff. And he's a bit of a cheeky character. And I said, well, what are you drinking? And he goes, Guinness. He goes, make it 2 of them and the list is yours. So
it's a big price.
Yeah,
there.
But it wasn't really that private because the Rangers all signed up and said, yeah, he was just having a bit of fun because the Rangers all said, like share the list. And so I contacted this list and said, hey, I've got this idea. I want to make a film about tell our story, basically, who's up. And all these Rangers from around the world said, hey, come, we'll look after you. And so
cool.
I booked a round the world ticket for a whole year. Sold the car, remortgaged the house, broke up with the fiance, and yes, that was her fault. No, that just ran its course. She's a lovely person, but we're going in different directions. I wanted to do this. Yeah.
I mean, were there stages where you're like, okay, this is going to take a bigger commitment than just like, a few weeks and I'm going to have to make some major life changes? Or were you just like so drawn to it that it wasn't really much of a decision?
It was a non-decision. Yeah, it was like, I have to do this. This is just, it's calling me. It was big. Like, I was like, I was excited. Like, going around the world, visit these rangers. And so I got on a plane and with a camera, not knowing how to make a film and going to a country. I landed in South America first. I didn't speak Spanish. So here we go, jump in the deep end. I spent a couple of nights in Santiago and realized that they're good at partying in Santiago in Chile, and then headed down to Villarrica volcano where a ranger called Marcelo was down there. And, a week later I'm climbing volcanoes wearing crampons on a snow and ice covered volcano filming. And I still remember there was one ranger, I won't say where from, but he was critical of me doing this project. Out of all the 400 rangers, he said, we're trying to get a National Geographic film happening and this could spoil it. And I said, I literally just come down from the mountain that day because I went up 3 or 4 times that mountain. I said, well, I've just come off the mountain filming. When you get the nod for that big project, let me know. And if I'm in the way, I'll get out of the way. But, that project's still never been made. So
yeah. That's how it usually goes in the film world.
18 years later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from there, I just went around the world and had amazing experiences with rangers right through, Latin America, North America, Europe, Africa, then later in Asia, and then in Indigenous Australia as well. I think it was over 120 hours of footage or something like that. And I had to whittle that down and I actually sat there. Yeah, I went through it. Well, as a filmmaker, you'll know what that means. And so, but what was critical was that I went through every bit of footage and I just set up this system of my own, just try and get it clear in my head. What did I have here? And so I just made a spreadsheet, printed out in a folder, and I sat there and I created some codes of good footage, action footage, landscape, blah, 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 and rated every minute of those 100 and something hours, which was critical because when I went to this professional filmmaker editor, I said, can you help me? He went, oh, here we go, amateur hour. But then he saw this folder and he saw the work I put in and he said, we can easily take out that. If you can get all those good bits out that you've highlighted in green, because I've green highlighted all the good bits, he goes, put that in and I'll help you make the film for free. So he probably did, I don't know, I wouldn't put a value on it, but would have cost me an arm and a leg to get done professionally. But it was because he said, you're passionate, but you're organised.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. And so the film itself wasn't the greatest filmed production ever. It certainly wasn't. It was an amateur film, but what it did have, it had heart, and it had truth, and it had trust.
Yeah.
So the rangers I was visiting trusted me. So they told me their stories. Whereas if you probably sent out a film crew that didn't have that connection as another ranger, you might get some of the story. You probably would, but you wouldn't get the in-depth openness that I think I got. And that professional filmmaker actually commented on that. He goes, what's great about this film is the trust. You've got a really open dialogue with these other rangers. They want to tell you their story because you're a ranger, and they get that you care. And so, yeah, I wasn't a professional filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker of sorts now, I suppose. I've made two. But, yeah, it was the heart of the Rangers that made that film.
Yeah, I mean, that trust and vulnerability is such a huge part. And like you're saying, I think a good story outweighs good production value, like almost all the time. So, and I watched it recently, and you can just see, I mean, I remember, I actually wrote down his name, John Makambo from Uganda. He just seemed like such a charismatic guy. And I remember, and this is maybe more kind of getting into the Ranger stories a little bit, but he was talking about how these Rangers are out on deployment so long that when he got home, his young son would call him uncle. And, you know, and you were like, how's that make you feel? And he's like, not good. You know, it's tough to be away from family that long, and just to have that vulnerability and hear those stories, it's pretty powerful, because I think most people have no idea what most of these men and women go through that are out there protecting these areas.
Yeah, I remember that scene, and I remember filming that and I'm still getting chills down my spine when he said it. John, you're right. John is a very charismatic guy. He's actually the head of all of conservation in Uganda now. So he's gone up from being the head ranger at Bawindi to being head of conservation over all national parks in Uganda.
That's amazing.
He's still a dear friend. But yeah, you're right. He's very charismatic, and he's very much a family man, but he's separated. In that film, he tells you, sometimes up to a year almost from seeing his kids, and they called him uncle. But what was really powerful about that scene was when he told this story, and you could see he felt like crying, and you feel like crying watching it. Yeah. But he has this veneer of a pretense of a smile over the top of that story, like he's smiling almost to keep his tears back. Yeah. And he's like, and then, I think when we stopped filming, he did have tears in his eyes, but he kept smiling through it all. And I suppose that sums up a lot of Rangers. They go through a lot, and they somehow find a way through. But he's also had Rangers shot next to him and killed when he's protecting the mountain gorillas, which is, on the border of DRC there. I mean, I should qualify that it's absolutely safe to go see the gorillas in Uganda now and Rwanda. Congo's up and down at times. Then, 20, 30 years ago when he was protecting them, he had Rangers killed. He's lived the life of a ranger from a base ranger, which makes him a great boss of other rangers because he gets what it's like to be in the field. I know rangers that sometimes they get their 2 days off in a month, and it takes a day to get home and a day to get back on the bus. So they don't go because it's too traumatic for the kids and them to say hello for 5 minutes or an hour and then go home. I know rangers that go home, they get home late at night, they say hello to their wife, but they don't wake the kids because they don't want to go through the trauma of saying goodbye again for both. I know rangers that have to put their kids who are 3 or 4 years old into boarding school because there's no schools where they work remote. And we're trying to work on a project there in actually Uganda, in Murchison Falls, I think it is, to maybe put a school in there for the rangers in their community so they don't have to do that. But yeah, people like John Makambo, they made the film. I mean, like having, I remember a ranger from Danvedova in Canada talking about how he had to deal with his 60-something, death in the park, and he tells really deep stories about that. But I had the same standard set of questions for each ranger. So I asked them, what's your funniest experience? What's your worst experience? What's the most dangerous experience? Why'd you become a ranger? I asked them all the same questions. I even got amazing responses, like from Guatemala or Costa Rica. A ranger said, I became a ranger, and he's talking in Spanish, but he basically, do you know Skippy, the series Skippy, the bush kangaroo? It's an Australian series about a ranger, basically a kangaroo that guides them to all the trouble. Like, there's someone chopping down the trees. Yeah, come over this way. And he said somehow he got that series, this Australian series about a ranger and a kind of a talking kangaroo that made him want to be a ranger.
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, yeah. Oh, and then stories of rangers getting, charged by elephants. I tell this one a bit. Up a tree, and there's 6 lions in the tree above him. Once he's in, he
Oh,
realised
God.
something wasn't right. He looked up, and there's 6 lions in the tree too. But yeah, the hilarious stories, the dangerous stories, but just full of life. So it had
Yeah.
life, and that's what really excited me about it. Was like it wasn't this flat line thing that we're meant to all chase, like get to Nirvana, get your house, and get your 2.2 kids, and it's and then have a great job and retire, then die. It wasn't this kind of looking for stability. It was actually embracing life in its fullest, all of its ups and downs, and going, yep, we're immersed in life in these beautiful protected areas, national parks, where the biodiversity is incredible, where life abounds, where there's struggles on the downside to protect it. So that's what was incredibly exciting about traveling around the world visiting these ranges. It was life in all of its glory and all of its faults. It was the
Yeah.
up and down of how life goes. And for me, it was a real learning curve that the sooner you accept that life is like that, it has ups and downs. And when you do something with passion, like you and I do, and anybody who's done something they really care about, all that happens, I think, with that curve of the ups and downs is it gets peakier and trophier.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's bigger highs, bigger amazing experiences, but bigger lows because you give a shit about stuff. And so that was the start of that for me, is living a life with passion, I suppose, and with purpose, is to go, well, I've got to accept these highs and lows.
Hmm. What else did you learn on that trip, or what were some other experiences that stand out? Because I mean, that's was it 14 months in total? This whole process of making this film, or the shooting it?
Yeah, of actual filming was 14 months. Yeah. And then it's probably about a 3-year process whilst also working part time and then try to balance that stuff. So it was probably 3 years from starting filming to releasing it. Yeah, 3.5 probably. Yeah, what did I learn? Wow, that's a big one. I suppose I learned a lot about embracing the good in yourself through the Rangers, watching how these Rangers went through a lot, but they embraced both the good in themselves, like use the best out of themselves to do this really difficult job,
Hmm.
but then also saw the good in others, who were trying to help them, and also empathy as well. Like the Rangers would often have empathy, even for we're meant to have this kind of Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker thing with poachers,
Yeah.
but many of the Rangers were empathetic. Would say, "Hey, that guy's trying to feed their family, and I get it."
Yeah, I remember, just to interrupt you, I remember, I think it was one of the Indian Rangers. There were some women with machetes cutting firewood or something like that, and it really goes to
Mm,
like how much communication is a huge skill of being a ranger. And he, had this conversation with them, telling them why not to do it, and then he let them take their machetes and leave. And I don't know if it was you or someone was saying like you're just going to let them go. And he's like, yeah, like I let them understand and, warn them a couple times before something happens, but we try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And it's, kind of like you're saying, like seeing the good in people, and that, he can tell the difference between also like a commercial poacher versus a subsistence. And, these women were just trying to provide something for their home or their
yeah.
families, and, just trying to explain, this is your forest. We need to protect it in this way so it can continue. It was a great moment in that film, I thought.
Well, he was almost in tears at the end of that because of the hopelessness of the situation. He said, as you said, there's a big scale of poachers. If you got your subsistence poachers just trying to feed their families, or collect firewood or whatever it is, right through to commercial poachers, militias, and even terrorist groups. It's been
Hmm.
documented. So you got this whole scale of poachers. Some of the best rangers are ex-poachers that have come on because they know the tricks, you know. But in that particular situation, Paresh Parob's his name, a ranger in Goa, and he's one of my dear friends. We connected really strongly on that trip. He's a man of absolute integrity, and he released those women that were cutting firewood in the park. They're poor women. He goes, it's just so hopeless. They've got no alternative. He goes, I need to get solar cookers for them and train them how to use solar cookers so they don't have to. So we actually did, one of our first projects was to give Paresh some money to buy some solar cookers there. But yeah, he was just desperate. He was like, wow. And he had to be careful because they had
Yeah.
machetes. Just because they're poor poachers doesn't mean that they're not capable of stuff. So he if you watch the footage carefully, you'll see that he's got his hand on his back hip where he had a gun just in case. He was never going to pull the gun, but just in case, well, he was outnumbered 1 to 7 or 8, and they went just when there was a couple of guys. And anyway, he took empathy with them and said, well, go and let's. The reason he said it's your park is they said to him, it's your park, you're the ranger, it's your park. He goes, no, it's your park. It's your. If once this is gone, you'll have no other firewood, and once this is gone, you'll have no insects to help your crops. And once this is gone, he's educating them. But he said they are just hand to mouth, day to day, and this is a problem. I also witnessed something else, or he told me a story about something else, where on the other side, a very wealthy politician had cut a big swathe through his park, a road basically through his park, connecting across state borders. And the reason they're doing it was to bootleg liquor from one state to another because the taxes were different or something anyway financially. So he employed this bunch of poor people to cut this road through this forest. He arrested all of those people and put them in jail. Anyway, this rich politician came down and said, you must let them go. You don't know who I am. I'm this he said, you know who I am. I'm this rich politician. I'm powerful. I'll have you arrested. I'll have you kicked out of your job. Little ranger guy, let my people go. And Presh said, yes, your people can go. Quite right. And then so the poor workers were leaving, and as the rich politician came in behind them to leave the jail, Presh grabbed him by the collar and said, because it's you I want to arrest. You're the one that did all this. Now get in jail, and put him in jail. Now this rich, powerful businessman politician, death threats, the works. And people said, you've got to let this guy go. He's powerful. He's going to have you knocked off, or at least fired. And Presh said, I don't care. If I make it good enough for him, then it's good enough for everybody. And no.
Yeah.
And he took him to court. He did the whole thing. Such integrity, and that's one of the things I learned. If going back to that question, is the integrity of rangers around the world. Don't get paid a lot, risk a lot, but care passionately about what they do, and will hold the ground. Sometimes to their misfortune too, as we talked earlier. So yeah, I was inspired by people like Paresh and John Macombo that you mentioned, two great examples in the film, and two of the people around the world, they're in my Ranger good list, angel list. Like you could give them anything and they would do something amazing with it. You give them your credit card, you wouldn't have to worry about a thing going missing. You can trust your life with them. They're amazing people. So two great examples of inspiring. I got inspired. I learned that people can be amazing, incredible. I mean, day to day, those people that you mentioned like that, they're my inspiration for keeping this work going when I often feel like this is too much. Wow, yeah. No, you take me back to some amazing memories. Sure. And, I got to release a Cobra with Paresh too. Like he goes, hey, you do snake handling, you told me? I said, yeah. He said, well, I've got a Cobra. They're really easy to handle, because they just come up. Do you want to re-release it? I said, yeah, that'd be great. So we did that together. We went on patrols together. We slept on a beach where they have Indian dolphins coming up and turtles hatching on the beach. And he had a guard dog that was guarding, trained to sit by itself and guard the turtle eggs during the night so that people wouldn't come and poach them. You share these amazing experiences. So I've made lifelong friends out of that trip.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of just goes back to just following something that's kind of in you. And this, I think a lot of people are afraid to leave that, the life of normal society of having enough money to pay the bills and have the house and all that thing, which are important to a certain degree, but to be able to have that life experience for 14 months going around the world. I mean, do you have any regrets?
Now that I've got a young family, I've got a little boy who's 6. I mean, I eventually sold that house, and now that's tripled in value, and I can't buy a house anymore in my area. It's happening
everywhere right now, I feel like.
In fact, it's probably getting hard to rent, yeah. So is that a regret? Would I do the same thing? I would do the same thing, because I'd want that example to my son to say, hey, follow your passion, do what you really want to do. So no, I don't regret any of that. So many serendipitous things have happened since from that decision. And I suppose it's that initial decision that then propels you down a path. I often use a term for Thin Green Line when I started it or got the concept is I went over this waterfall without a kayak, without a boat, just went over this massive waterfall. And for quite a while, I've been going down the rapids ever since and coming up for breath every now and then. And it still feels like that at times. But now with a good solid team, Tim and Lee and Jen and the team, plus the connections and collaborations around the world, I feel like I get to some smoother waters, enough smoother water to keep me in the game, because you can't go up and down the rapids forever. And that actually happened on the original film trip. I nearly died in Costa Rica. I went in a grade 7 rapids it was grade 5, but they said this is probably 7 because we just had torrential rain. So yeah, let's go rafting. Well, I came out in those rapids and I was held down for a minute and a half and a hold down. It was just packing on the back of my neck and back, and I couldn't get up. Anyway, I nearly drowned on that trip. But that's why I suppose that analogy is pretty real for me when I talk about how Thin Green Line started from the film, as I went over that waterfall, down the rapids, and coming up for a breath every now and then. But that's when you're alive, when you haven't got breath and you come up for the breath, and
that's when you realize you're alive.
There it is,
for sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm alive. Yeah, the closer you are to dying, the more you realize you're alive. And Jane Goodall, who's become a friend since and a really great supporter of Thin Green Line, I asked her about this serendipity and, all these amazing things that happen after you start something like this. And she said, it's like you plug into a wall of electricity of all these other people that are trying to do good things. Like here we are talking and you're doing an amazing film and you're doing all of your stuff. But had I not taken that first step over the waterfall, we wouldn't be here talking. I wouldn't have met John Moncombo. I wouldn't have met Paresh in India. So she said, you plug into this wall and you connect, and other good people of integrity are doing the same thing. But you've got to do the first bit. You first got to plug into that wall. And that doesn't happen by sitting on your ass doing nothing. You've got to actually get active. And then the serendipity rolls. Then you're going down the river, if you like, and you're coming up for breath and you're getting bumped and you're up and down. It comes back to that up and down analogy. But you've got to take the first step.
Yeah, first leap, at least.
Yeah, leap, step, stupid decision.
So I want to get a little bit more of, what happened when you finished that film and how did that kind of roll into the Thin Green Line Foundation and kind of get some of that, and then try and, as we wrap up, talk a little bit more about Rangers and kind of some of the challenges they're facing, what you guys are doing, and how other people can get involved. So first, just kind of how did that film come to an end and how did that kind of propel things forward from there?
Yeah, well, cool, John. I came back and I went back to my Ranger job, and then when I got home from work, I spent all that time going through the footage and doing all that stuff. I went around trying to get support. I got that filmmaker on board. And an amazing thing happened was a guy in my local area said, geez, what you're doing deserves some media coverage. And I said, how do I do that? I have no experience. He had someone who knew someone, and they got me on national TV in Australia. This guy that sold his car and remortgaged his house and making a film he doesn't know how to make because he cares about Rangers, and he's a Ranger. So they did this, it's called 7:30 Report on the national broadcaster. And it went to probably, big audience for Australia, probably 1.5 million people. But the right crowd too, the people that watch and care about this kind of stuff, probably the right demographic. And anyway, I didn't know how I was going to finish the film. I didn't know, even then, I think I was going to start a foundation. No, I didn't know then. Oh, no, I did. So I'd made a shortcut and I went to the next Ranger Congress in Scotland 3 years later. So that was 2004 was the first one, then 2006. So, 2003, 2006. Anyway, I'm in Scotland. I made a short film. I'd raised 5,000 grand from the short film, just trying to cover some costs to finish the film. And the then president of the International Ranger Federation, David Zeller, said, hey, don't give us the money. We're not a charity organisation. We want to support the families of widows. Yep, that's what you've got. Because I said, here's $5,000 for the widows. I'm giving it all to you guys to give to widows. And they go, well, we got the idea. We don't have the mechanism. So, well, what do I do with it? He said, well, set up the charity arm for International Ranger Federation. I said, well, how do I do that? He and the secretary at the time, Sean Prendergast, said, you got this far, you'll work it out. And I actually sat on a plane next to a lawyer coming back from that Congress going, how do I start this charity arm thing that they want me to do? So it wasn't my idea, really. I had the kind of the mechanism in a way. And I sat next to this lawyer and I said, what kind of law do you do? He said, on this big flight back towards Australia. And he said, it's a bit boring. And I said, hit me. It's a long flight. He goes, well, I set up charitable organisations.
Wow.
And that law firm is still our law firm to this day. And so from that, the cog started turning. So we're going down this river again, up and down this rapids. Then this 7:30 report happened to 1.5 million people. And I'm now starting this foundation, and I go, how am I going to do this foundation and do my job as a ranger? Like, I got to finish the film.
Juggling just a few balls. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this one guy saw well, a number of people saw that, but this one particular guy said, "Look, I'm not optometrist. I've done all right with my business. Is it true that you sold your car and you remortgaged your house and you're doing something you don't know how to do because you care?" I said, "Yep, it's all true." He goes, "Well, I think he said I'll give you 20 grand to finish it." And I said, "Are you sure? Like, well, what do you want me to do with it?" He said, "Well, look, go to the Bahamas for a holiday if you like. You probably deserve it." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that, but can I think about it?" And he said, "Sure." So I rang him back the next day or two. I said, "I've got an idea. I want to run this by you. I'm going to quit my job as a ranger so I can finish the film and start the foundation. Can I use half of the money to finish the film and half the money I'll spread over 6 months to pay, just buy some food?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's fine." And so that's how, and then the Thin Green Line Foundation was born 6 months later, and the film was launched on the first World Ranger Day. And we showed the film all around the world and just asked people, "Hey, can you show it on this one day, on World Ranger Day, all around the world?" And we had 130 or 140 showings around the world, and 15,000 people registered and watched it on that one day. This was pre-YouTube, by the way, and pre all that. You had to get a copy of the DVD. And we had to do, zonings for USA and all the different DVD kind of calibrations around the world.
Oh, yeah. Remember burning those?
Yeah. But yeah, then I realized, geez, look at this community around this. And what was really amazing about that is I still remember this I shouldn't say old, but they were a retired couple, and they had their friends around to watch the film, and they had a dinner, and they put a Thin Green Line tape down the middle of their tablecloth just to get in the theme. And they all were going to donate $20 to the cause, which is cool. But they watched the film and they sat around talking about the issues afterwards, and they all donated $200.
It's huge.
And so what I realized is that you create community and people can discuss the issues, then you get action. Instead of just everyone independently going to a cinema or watching it on their computer, or, as you do now, we created community out of it. And then the Thin Green Line Foundation was born. And I still remember showing it we did a big premiere in Melbourne at a beautiful theatre called the Astor, which is this Art Deco theatre, and had 1,000 people there. And we had bands, Widiana Marika, who's the founder of a band called Yothu Indi, an Indigenous band, amazing Indigenous band. He and his brother Bunala played an Indigenous song called Guruku, which is the Brolga song about protecting the land. And just with clapsticks, like 2 sticks hitting, and their beautiful voice singing, you could hear a pin drop before the film started. And that launched the Thin Green Line. And we had 1,000 people there, and we had all these bands play afterwards, and we created this energy, and it was a good party afterwards to celebrate. And I remember the next day carrying down the takings. It was about 20 grand takings to the bank in a plastic bag down the street. And I thought, if someone tries to mug me, they're going to have to kill me because I'm not giving this up. I've done too much, gone through too much. Yeah, and then I think that year we funded the first projects, like I mentioned with Paresh and some fallen rangers families that year, and the Thin Green Line Foundation was born, and that was 2007. So 15 years later, here we are, and we just gave out last year $1.6 million to rangers and supported about 3,000 rangers and their families, and then that scalability where it goes out to community. So there's still heaps more to do, but from humble beginnings, I'm proud of the work we do. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, it's kind of speaks to following that calling that you had. Like, you didn't really know where it was going. You just kind of kept following that, and
no idea.
Kind of stumbling along the way. And then sometimes the universe or whatever you believe in kind of hands you a little branch, and you're like, all right, got a lawyer next to me that's going to tell me how to do this. Yeah. And now you kind of find yourself where you are, just kind of continuing this journey. And yeah, it's such a great story of how it's come about.
I think the thing there, though, too, John, is that lawyer sitting next to you or the famous musician that I'm standing next to, is you've got to swallow your pride, like it's not. And so you've got to actually put yourself in rejection space a lot to get stuff like this done. And I've had that happen many times. People say, no, go
That's
away.
True.
But you got to realize that it's not about you. It's about, what I was doing is about the rangers and their families, and the rangers and their work, and the rangers themselves. I'm not asking for me. So reject it if you like. You're not rejecting me, and I can cop that day in, day out. It can wear you down a bit. I started getting better at telling the Rangers story and why this was compelling and why people should get involved. And I got more yeses because it wasn't about me. And because I didn't take any of the funds from the film, I spent my own money making the film. I didn't take any for me. Straight away, I didn't make it about me. And people were like, oh, that's interesting. You're not taking, most people would recoup the money and then the profits could go to the cause. But I gave it all to the cause. And people asked why. I said, well, I had a great time filming it. I wanted to do it. It was my choice. No one forced me to. But also, I didn't want anyone to have an angle saying, well, what's his angle? I gave them no angles. It's clear. It's about the Rangers. And so when you get into that space, when you're doing something with purpose, if it's not about you, it's so much easier to go do the hard asks of people and put yourself up for rejection all the time because it's not you.
Yeah, that's kind of on them, you know. I mean, you listen to these Rangers stories and it's hard not to want to find a way to help them out because they're just doing such amazing work and risking so much as well.
Yeah.
And we all benefit from their work, you know?
Yeah, and you get really great affirmations too. Like I remember telling the bass guitarist from Led Zeppelin, John Paul Jones, the story backstage at some gig. And he came up to me, him and two standout, Elvis Costello, two musicians that I really, appreciate. And both of them in different ways came and said, hey, thanks for telling me about that. It's made my experience here at this gig so much more worthwhile. And they asked intelligent questions about Rangers and what they're going through. And I thought, no, this connects to people. Even, and I've spoken to presidents of, the United States and the royal family, and this Ranger story, this human story, this humanity of Rangers and what they do to protect nature, it connects at a deep place it doesn't matter whether you're rich, famous, poor. I've had people give me their last $5 because they were connected to the story. The Ranger story is a really powerful one.
Yeah. So why do Rangers need more support? Or, I kind of want to get into what we can do to help, but maybe set up the stage a little bit. We've had a few stories here and there which kind of exemplifies some of the issues or things that Rangers have to deal with. But what are some of the challenges, and then what are some of the solutions that you think are the most important we should go after first?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose to set the stage, let's look at what Rangers do. And if anyone can tell me of a job that has this much responsibility, I'll start an organization and support them as well. But, Rangers, involved in mitigating climate change, protecting forests, locking up carbon, regenerating forests that have previously been decimated. So they're in climate change mitigation. We're in the middle of the next great extinction. Rangers are charged with protecting biodiversity that keeps us all alive, keeps our life systems happening. It's a pretty big responsibility. Rangers are involved in preventing the next zoonotic diseases by stopping wildlife trafficking. Rangers are involved in community health by the example I gave earlier, just even if it's emergency first aid, but providing jobs within their communities. One ranger in the Maasai area I mentioned before supports 24 other people in their community with their one salary. The list goes on and on and on for the responsibilities that rangers have. But then you match that with the support they don't get to do that incredible job. There's a massive gulf, and that's why Thin Green Line even exists. I wouldn't have started Thin Green Line if everything was sorted. So those same rangers that have to do all that work, we lose 120 to 150 rangers that we know of each year. And I can hand on heart, I've been doing this for 15 years or more, say that that's probably going to be over 200 plus rangers if we got all the data. We don't have all the data. And it really feels wrong to call it data. These are people dying in the line of duty. So let's scale back from that. Probably 50 to 70% of those deaths that we talk about are preventable with proper training, with the right equipment, whether that be for emergency first aid training or even avoidance of getting to those situations or handling those situations better. So training and equipping are really critical. They're two of our pillars for Thin Green Line. We have 4 pillars: training, equipping, emergency support, which covers fallen ranger as well when a ranger dies, and then connecting rangers. So rangers often don't have even the proper boots to go on patrol. I've seen heaps of rangers in the tropical forest wearing we call thongs, you call flip-flops, I think. Gumboots, okay, they can do the job, but they get ripped up. They don't have mosquito nets, so they get malaria 8 times a year. They don't have even water filtration. They're drinking putrid water and getting sick. They don't have proper uniforms to wear. So they're really uncomfortable. They don't even have a tent to sleep in. They sleep on the bare ground or on a tarp and huddle under another tarp. When a ranger isn't looked after with the right equipment and they're tired after a month of patrolling, can you imagine how the patrol is getting weaker and weaker as they go along, and they don't have ration packs, they don't have food, the basics. And then if something goes wrong and they get injured or killed, there's no compensation and no support often. So we as a world are saying, hey, go out there, protect our life systems, mitigate climate change, protect the biodiversity, protect our life systems, look after the communities as well, do the health stuff for your communities, do all this stuff. Hey, but guess what? There's nothing for you. And you can't send your kids to school and blah, 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 blah.
And you're risking your life, in a lot of cases.
And you're risking your life. Now, flip that around and say, hey, we've got the right equipment for you. And we've done this in areas we can see it works, where you give the proper training, where you give the proper equipment, where you give, and this all equals respect to me, and to the rangers. When you give them that recognition and respect by giving those things, poaching disappears almost. Not because the rangers were doing a bad job before, but because now the rangers are motivated, the rangers have the equipment, they have the training, the skills to do the job, and they can get organised, and they can recruit other rangers to join them.
Mm-hmm.
I've had many rangers say they don't want their children to be rangers because it's too dangerous and shit conditions. They'll do it because they're passionate about it, but they want their kids to do something else because they don't want them to die in the line of duty and go through the shit they've gone through. The opposite is true when you see a ranger, Patagonia sponsored us a bunch of uniforms, like, $1 million worth of uniforms, incredible stuff from them. And you see these rangers wearing these highest quality uniforms. They're tear-proof and breathable and fire-resistant. And they walk through in these really amazing uniforms through town when they're off duty, or when they're going through community on the way to somewhere else. They're proud. Hey, look at me, I'm a ranger. I've got this great uniform. And kids go, oh, look at those important people. And then those important people do first aid and save someone's life in the community or another ranger's life. They go, these rangers have skills that can help us. They're not just people saying, no, don't come in here. They're part of the community. They're doing stuff for the community, and they've got respect. So now you can recruit other rangers because it's considered a profession that you want to have, and your life means something really important, that you've got this task of protecting wildlife. You're seeing wildlife come back to the areas. So rangers have a huge responsibility, but they, generally speaking, they don't get the recognition or the support they deserve. And that's pretty much why Thin Green Line Foundation exists and works with the International Ranger Federation. And we partner with anybody that, within reason, is doing it for all the right reasons to get that support to rangers. Because when we do, it works.
What advice do you give other NGOs that are in this space in terms of how to approach supporting rangers? Because I feel like we had a conversation before, and there's kind of a right and wrong way to go about it, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
It's a good question. I suppose we talked about the tick box approach. If you want to go in and say you train rangers and you want to go in and say we did this and that, that's okay. I mean, rangers need support. I mean, I understand most people do stuff for the right reasons, but unless it's going to turn into a longer term capability with the rangers, not just capacity, because capacity can be untapped, but capability, like they're going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So the training, that's a really big thing for the training. So not to tick a geographic area and say we've done work there, or to tick an area and say we've done some training there. Will it be a long-term benefit? Not everything is long-term. Will it give emergency assistance that's going to get them to the next stage so that it doesn't disappear?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it's not all long-term. Sometimes it's, I've got to act now. There's whether it be a disaster or whether it be a conflict or whether it be something else, you've got to react quickly sometimes. But will it make a critical difference to those rangers and that community, be it long-term or in the emergency situation? If the answer is yes, we'll keep proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
In the area we're working, is there a reason to support these particular rangers amongst other rangers? Yep, there's greater biodiversity there. No one else is supporting them. It's not a sexy park that's got a lot of exposure. So, I mean, you see some parks that get, and protected areas get so much support because there's been some feature on them,
mm-hmm.
or they're well known or whatever, and that's great. But I know even rangers from there say, hey, stop giving us support. There's rangers in areas around us that got nothing. give them support. And then I suppose it's about building relationships. So once you've got the trusted relationships, that's the key probably. And that takes a little bit of time. It also takes some judgment. Sometimes you have to make a call. Is this the organisation we're going to work with, or is this the group of rangers? So, like, I'll do anything with Paresh Parab or John Macombo because I've got that long-standing relationship and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, knowing who to trust and when to trust, and also on the opposite, when to go, this is not good.
Yeah,
this might tick a lot of PR boxes. Yeah. Know when to walk away and go, nah, this isn't vibing. Because, sometimes money can be wasted too. So you want to honour every dollar that comes in your door to make sure it has an impact on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's not news for a lot of people working in NGOs, but I suppose maybe the hardest one is building the trust and spending time and making sure it's going to have that longer term impact, or at least immediate impact, and not. Maybe this is the way I'll sum it up. Is it going to benefit rangers overall? Yeah. Not the question should be, is it going to benefit us as an organisation?
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe that's the best way of doing it. If this is great for rangers and it's going to be great for biodiversity and great for their community, let's do it. And you as an organisation should be down the list. I think maybe sometimes it's flipped the other way around. This will be good optics for our organisation to do this job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a balance because you do want to tell a story to get that support, but I think it is easy for that to then accidentally flip to where suddenly it's more about getting the eyeballs and less about actually getting any of those resources to the people. So it's like you always have to be aware of where you stand in that dynamic.
Yeah, well, it's a good point. I mean, the PR aspects are important. You've got to report on your impacts and report that we've helped rangers save this species or protect this area. I mean, you've got to tell that story. That should be the bonus, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I think if you just do it with integrity, if you wherever you operate, you do it with integrity, that'll shine through eventually. And maybe that's what Thin Green Line needs to be better at. We need to be better at telling the impacts of what we do because we're so busy actually doing the work that we forget to tell people about it sometimes.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. Although you guys have produced some pretty awesome content on social media as well. I'm always following you, and every once in a while we're trying to repost some of the stuff that you guys do. And Jane Goodall's done some amazing stuff with you guys as well. So
I'll pass that on to the team, John. I can't take any credit for that. I'm definitely not the social media person.
No, but is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of what you guys are doing at Thin Green Line, how other people can get involved and support rangers?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jane Goodall again, and we've mentioned her. She just recently narrated an animation for us. If you want to find out more about what Thin Green Line does, but what rangers do and why rangers are important, there's a 2-minute animation that Jane Goodall's narrated. And just go to the Thin Green Line YouTube and look up Jane Goodall. I think it's Jane Goodall asks, will you join the Thin Green Line or something? But it's a 2-minute animation and it explains a really complex thing that we've been talking about for an hour and a half, and I feel like I've left out 99% of it. But it kind of gives a 2-minute snapshot of that. So watch that and share that a lot, because that, for people who aren't aware of what rangers do, right, listen to this podcast, sure. But if others aren't committed to listen for an hour and a half to me bang on about stuff, show them this 2-minute clip and say, this is what rangers do. Jane Goodall narrated it. She's on board because she said to me when I first met her several years ago, this is the missing link in conservation. Looking after people that do the looking after. I think she said protecting nature's protectors. Yeah. She goes, it's so obvious. Why hasn't anyone done it before? And I said, well, it kind of fell in my lap in a way, but I just decided to do something about it. So she calls it that. And if someone of her standing sees this as a missing link in conservation, looking after the dedicated people that give everything to nature and protecting our planet, then I think you should prick up and go, hang on, I should probably tune in here a bit. There's something here. It's not, I'm obviously parochial and very passionate about rangers, but it's not just Sean Willmore saying rangers are important. I mean, you know it, John. A lot of people who have connected to rangers know how important rangers are. But watch this 2-minute clip and then see where that takes you and start thinking about, should we actually do a little bit more for the people that protect the animals that we tell stories about to our children every night, about elephants and rhinos and tigers. And we tell these stories to our kids. Nursery rhymes, and they involve these animals all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a group of people out there risking their lives and actually dying to protect those stories and those species. So yeah, I suppose watch that 2-minute clip and go further. I feel like there's so much more I should say, but all around the world right now, while we're having this conversation, there's rangers on patrol, there's rangers away from their family, there's rangers giving so much to protect our natural world. And all I'd ask people to do is to pay a bit of attention to them. And if they've got a few spare dollars, it doesn't have to be Thin Green Line, but find an avenue to support rangers, get that support to the ground where it counts. That's what I'm proud about, the way we operate. We get it to the rangers. Yeah, and give them a little bit more respect for what they sacrifice. And it's not all doom and gloom. Rangers are winning. When we give them the support, that they're winning the game. Their communities are getting more involved. The species are being protected. Less forest is being cut down. But we can't put our head in the sand any longer. We're at the 11th hour and 59th minute of all of this, and we got to do it now. So don't wait. Be inspired by the Ranger story and get involved now. Even if you don't leave your living room, you don't have to go around the world and do what I did, sell your car and keep your house. Please do that. Don't sell your house. But just even if you can give a few bucks from your living room and support the rangers who are out there doing the work, do it. Get involved. Tell your kids the stories. Watch the video. Share the video of Jane. Get engaged. Get involved.
Yeah, really well put, Sean. And I mean, I think, so many people enjoy watching those wildlife shows on TV. National Geographic, BBC does some great stuff. But for me, I think these human stories are even more powerful, like you're saying, and like the video and the film you made. And when you see people that are so passionate about the work they do, I feel like it resonates with other people because, all of us, I think, are looking for that thing that we can connect with, that we can do in the world. And rangers, for me, are some of the people that have that strongest instinct and do that kind of work. And like you, so many of these rangers that I've met have been such a huge inspiration to me, and just instantly gain your respect when you meet them and you see how much passion they have for it. So yeah, just really appreciate all the amazing work that you're doing to bring more light and support and awareness of what these men and women are doing.
Thanks, John. Well, we started the whole thing talking about the Chitwan conference, and what you said there, you felt that energy at that conference of 600 rangers from around the world. It's not like any other work conference. It's totally different to probably what I imagine an accountant's conference would be like. You got 600. No offense to accountants, I need them, and we all need them. But exactly. These rangers are all passionately dedicated, giving so much to the world, and they get them under the same tent. And there's this energy, like, I get you. You get me. We've had rangers in conflict zones from opposite countries that are at war with each other that are working together. Now there's a relationship between the German and Israeli Ranger Association, because when we were in Europe, we had a little program, just an idea, a colonel and Israeli Rangers and German Rangers went to a Holocaust site together and carried each other's flags. Apparently that was the first time since the Holocaust that Germans and the Israelis have carried each other's flags on a Holocaust site. And I said, no, surely it's been done before. They said, the Israelis said, can you imagine any Israeli government suggesting that and approving that? No way. So Rangers go beyond all that politics and go the shared humanity of caring for the planet. And we're seeing it now. I know of Russian Rangers that are really upset with what's happening in Ukraine and their colleagues in Ukraine. There's a shared humanity, and you get them under that same roof, you can feel it. You felt it there in Chitwan. It's like, wow, this is really inspiring. It's almost too much energy to deal with. Like you go, wow, where do I go? I suppose hopefully we've helped tap people into these passionate, amazing people that give so much by talking about it and sharing some of their stories. Like I said, there's so much more I could share. So many funny stories and experiences.
Yeah, we could talk for hours.
Yeah, we could bang on. I definitely do bang on, and people know I yap on too much, but especially when I'm passionate about something like this. But thanks, John, for creating the space, and I'm wishing you great success with your film that's about to come out. Another piece in the jigsaw puzzle of telling some stories that will hopefully motivate people to get behind it.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
And to all the Rangers out there, if they're listening, thanks for your amazing work. And we continue the fight with you and stand with the Rangers. And to the people that aren't Rangers but are inspired, please stand with the Rangers. World Ranger Day is coming up on July 31st. It's a perfect opportunity to spread the word, and together as a shared humanity, we can do this, but we've got to go over the waterfall together and, be prepared to take the leap and do something about it.
Thank you so much, Sean. And everyone, they can go to thingreenline.org.au. Is that correct? To find out more?
Yeah, correct. We went to get the .org in the very beginnings of Thin Green Line, but someone had, they buy them to then sell them back to you. So
yeah.
they want a stupid amount of money to buy it back, and they're not getting that money. So for now, you've got to put a .au to get to us at the end.
Yeah, that's all right. That extra money goes to the Rangers, so it's important.
That's right, yeah. Thanks, John, and thanks everyone for listening.
Appreciate it. Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Rhino Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're excited to see the film succeed, please subscribe and review our podcast on Spotify and iTunes. Then follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rhino Man the Movie. More details about Rhino Man, the social impact campaign, and future screenings are at rhinomanthemovie.org. To learn more about the Global Conservation Corps and their work, visit globalconservationcorps.org. Sign up for the newsletter and follow GCC on all of the social platforms. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe and catch up on GCC's Voices of Nature podcast, where Bob Ludke interviews a wide range of people who've dedicated their lives to making a difference in conservation. A special thanks goes out to Simone Wilson for the music for this podcast. He's the brilliant composer for Rhino Man the Movie. Learn more about his work at simonewilsonmusic.com. Until next time, I'm John Jerko, and this is the Rhino Man Podcast.